The silence in Anderson's house was not empty, it was heavy. It was a physical weight that settled on the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun, a pressure that pressed against the windows like an oncoming storm. At 74, Anderson had learned to navigate the silence the way he used to navigate construction sites, with caution, respect, and a keen eye for structural weaknesses. He sat at the mahogany dining table, a piece of furniture that had once hosted loud Thanksgiving dinners, arguments over politics, and the clattering of silverware from a family of 3. Now, it hosted only him, a cup of lukewarm Earl Grey tea, and the ledger. Anderson was a structural engineer by trade, retired for 8 years now. His mind still worked in loads and vectors, in stress points and foundations. He knew that if you removed a load-bearing wall, the roof would eventually cave in. He looked at the checkbook lying open next to his tea. The numbers in the balance column were dwindling, a slow erosion of his life's savings that felt terrifyingly like a roof beginning to sag. "It's for the future," he whispered to himself, his voice raspy from disuse. He adjusted his glasses, staring at the check he had just written. $4,000. It was payable to Monica Sterling, his daughter-in-law. The memory of the phone call from earlier that morning played in his head on a loop. It had been Julian, his son. Julian, the pride of his life. Julian, who had inherited his mother's charm, but Anderson feared none of her grit. "Dad, I know it's a lot to ask," Julian had said, his voice crackling over the line. The background noise had been a wash of static and distant announcements. "But this trip to Tokyo is critical. If I land the Nakamura account, we're set. I mean, really set. But the firm's per-dime policy is lagging, and I have to front the hotel costs. Monica is freaking out about the mortgage. Can you help her? Just until the reimbursement comes through." Anderson had closed his eyes, picturing his handsome son in a crisp suit, navigating the neon-lit streets of Tokyo, fighting for his family's future. Anderson knew what it was like to build something. It took sacrifice. "Of course, son," Anderson had replied. "Focus on the work. I'll handle Monica." "You're a lifesaver, Dad. Seriously. I've got to run. Boarding is starting. Love you." The line had gone dead before Anderson could say it back. Now the doorbell rang, shattering the silence. Anderson capped his pen, the check written. He stood up, his knees popping audibly. He walked to the door, passing the hallway mirror. He saw a man who looked older than he felt, gray hair thinning, shoulders slightly stooped, wearing a cardigan that Eleanor, his late wife, had bought him 10 years ago. He opened the door. It was Monica. She looked frantic, as she always did these days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was clutching her smartphone like a lifeline. She didn't say hello. She just exhaled a sharp breath that smelled of peppermint gum and anxiety. "Anderson," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Did Julian call you? I'm so sorry to bother you, really, I feel terrible. But the bank sent another notice, and with him being in Japan, the transfer delays are just killing us?" Anderson offered a gentle smile. "Come in, Monica. Breathe, it's all right." She paced the foyer, her heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood. "It's just so much pressure," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "He's working so hard, 18-hour days. He texted me saying he barely slept on the flight, and here I am, unable to even keep the lights on because the firm is so slow with their payouts." Anderson walked to the dining table and picked up the check. He returned and held it out to her with a steady hand. "I wrote this right after he called," Anderson said softly. $4,000. That should cover the mortgage and the utilities for the month, with a little extra for groceries." Monica stopped pacing. She looked at the check, her eyes widening. For a second, Anderson thought he saw something flash behind her gaze. Not relief, but calculation. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a performative slump of gratitude. "Oh, Anderson," she sighed, taking the check and tucking it immediately into her purse. "I don't know what we'd do without you. Julian is going to be so relieved. He worries about you. He hates asking." "He's my son," Anderson said simply. "We build foundations for our children so they can build skyscrapers. That's the job." "You're a good man," Monica said. She checked her phone. "I have to run. I have to get this to the bank before they close, and then I have to pick up the dry cleaning. It never ends. Stay for tea?" Anderson asked, a hint of hope in his voice. "I just made a fresh pot." Monica was already halfway out the door. "I wish I could," rain checked. "Once Julian is back from Tokyo, we'll do a big family dinner, promise." "All right," Anderson said. "Drive safe." The door clicked shut. The silence rushed back in, reclaiming the space. Anderson walked back to the kitchen. He poured the tea down the sink. It had gone cold. He began to wash the cup, the hot water running over his hands. He thought about Tokyo. He had always wanted to go there with Eleanor. They had saved for a trip in '98, but then the roof needed repairing. Then Julian needed braces. Then Julian needed college tuition. Then Eleanor got sick. Now Julian was there. Anderson felt a vicarious thrill. His son was international. His son was important. Anderson dried his hands on a towel. He walked into the living room and sat in his armchair, facing the fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. He picked up a framed photograph from the side table. It was from Julian's college graduation. Julian was beaming, his arm around Anderson's shoulder. Eleanor was on the other side, looking frail but radiant. "He's doing well," Anderson whispered to the photo. "He's working hard, just like we taught him." But as the afternoon wore on and the shadows lengthened, a small, nagging thought scratched at the back of Anderson's mind. It was a detail, a tiny inconsistency, the kind an engineer notices on a blueprint. When Julian had called, the background noise didn't sound like Haneda Airport. There were no chimes, no Japanese announcements. It sounded like clinking glass and laughter. Anderson shook his head. Paranoia? He scolded himself. The boy is at an airport lounge. Of course there's glass and laughter. He picked up the remote and turned on the television to drown out the silence. But his mind remained on the ledger and the dwindling numbers that measured out the remainder of his life. 2 days later, the rain arrived. It wasn't a storm, just a gray, persistent drizzle that turned the world the color of wet slate. Anderson spent the morning in his garage, organizing his tools. He didn't use them much anymore, but keeping them oiled and aligned gave him a sense of control. He had a system for everything. Screws in jars by size, wrenches hung by millimeter. It was a universe where things fit, unlike the world outside, where bank accounts drained for mysterious reasons and suns were always halfway across the globe. Around 1100 a.m., a large delivery van pulled into his driveway. It was sleek, black with gold lettering on the side, Vanguard Luxury Logistics. It wasn't the usual postal service or the brown UPS truck. This was high-end courier service. Anderson wiped his hands on a rag and walked out to the porch. The driver, a young man in a sharp uniform who looked harried and stressed, jumped out, holding an electronic pad. He scanned the house numbers, then looked at the package in his hand. It was a long, rectangular box wrapped in matte black paper with a silver ribbon. It oozed expense. Mr. Sterling, the driver called out, shielding the device from the rain. "That's me," Anderson said, stepping down the stairs. "Anderson Sterling." The driver frowned, tapping his screen. "I have a priority rush delivery for a Mr. Sterling. Signature required, ID verification needed." Anderson was confused. He hadn't ordered anything. He certainly hadn't ordered anything that required Vanguard Luxury Logistics. "I haven't ordered anything, son." "Is it a mistake?" "It says here Julian Sterling," the driver said. Anderson's heart did a little skip. "That's my son. But he's not here. He's in Tokyo." The driver looked at the label, then at his screen, then back at Anderson. He looked exhausted. "Look, sir, I'm running 40 minutes behind schedule because of the construction on the I-95. The manifest has 2 addresses listed. This is the billing address, but the delivery instructions say—" Wait, he squinted at the small text. Damn it. System glitch. It defaulted to the billing address because the same-day surcharge wasn't checked correctly. What is it?" Anderson asked, looking at the box. "It's a custom set of tight lease drivers, the gold inlay ones, limited edition." And Anderson blinked. "Golf clubs. Expensive golf clubs. For Julian?" Anderson asked. "Are you sure?" "Julian Sterling. Phone number ending in 8892. That's him." Anderson confirmed. The confusion was beginning to curdle into something colder. "But he's in Japan. Why would he order golf clubs to be delivered here?" The driver shook his head. "No, sir. Like I said, this is the billing address. The delivery address, the one it was supposed to go to, is right here in the notes." He turned the screen so Anderson could see. "Dilioardioi guest Julian Sterling Swait 484. Lucky to win. The Azure Springs Resort and Spa. Status Giustai in Residency." Anderson stared at the screen. The raindrops hit the glass surface, distorting the words, but he could read them clearly enough. The Azure Springs Resort. It was a luxury retreat about 45 miles north, nestled in the mountains. It was famous for its hot springs, its Michelin star dining, and its exorbitant prices. Azure Springs. Anderson repeated, his voice sounding hollow to his own ears. "Are you sure?" "Yeah." The driver sighed. "I have to drive all the way up there now." He called the depot an hour ago, screaming that his clubs hadn't arrived for his 100 p.m. tea time. "If I don't get these to him, I'm going to get written up." Anderson felt the ground beneath him shift. It wasn't an earthquake, it was the foundation of his reality cracking. He called an hour ago. Anderson asked. "Yeah, angry guy. Said he needed them for the tournament today." The driver looked at Anderson, his impatience softening into pity as he saw the color drain from the old man's face. "Sir, you okay?" Anderson gripped the porch railing. He's supposed to be in Tokyo. For work, I gave his wife money for the mortgage because he was in Tokyo. The driver looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight. Look, mister, I don't know family business. I just deliver the boxes. I gotta go. If he's at the Azure, I gotta get this there. Wit, Anderson said. The engineer's brain was kicking in. The shock was still there, but the need for verification for hard data was taking over. You're going there now? Yes, sir. Let me see the invoice. The driver hesitated, then handed Anderson the packing slip attached to the box. Anderson pulled his reading glasses from his shirt pocket. Edom Tightly T Series Custom. Cost $2,800 payment method, Visa ending in 499. Anderson's breath hitched. Visa ending in 499, that was his credit card. The one he had given Julian 3 years ago, for extreme emergencies only, like medical bills or car accidents. He paid with my card, Anderson whispered. The driver reached out and gently took the packing slip back. I'm sorry, sir. Really, but I have to go. The driver jogged back to the van, jumped in, and slammed the door. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle backed out, splashing through a puddle. Anderson stood alone in the rain. He was getting wet, the water soaking into his cardigan, but he didn't feel it. Tokyo, the Nakamura account, the lagging per diem, the mortgage, it all swirled in his mind, a vortex of lies. Julian wasn't in Japan. He was 40 miles away, playing golf with a 200 to 800 club purchased with Anderson's emergency fund, while staying in a suite that likely cost $800 a night. Anderson turned and walked back into the house. He didn't slam the door. He closed it with a soft, terrifying click. He walked to the phone. He dialed Julian's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. You've reached Julian Sterling. I'm currently overseas and traveling for business. Please leave a message or contact my wife, Monica, for urgent matters. The beep sounded. Anderson hung up. He didn't leave a message. He walked to the kitchen and picked up his car keys. They were for a 2008 Volvo station wagon. It was safe, reliable, and paid for. He wasn't going to call Monica. He wasn't going to cry. He was going to inspect the site. He was a structural engineer. He didn't work on hearsay. He worked on visual confirmation. He put on his raincoat. He checked his wallet. He checked his blood pressure, medication in his pocket. Then he walked out to the car. The drive to Azure Springs took 50 minutes. Anderson kept the Volvo in the slow lane, the windshield wipers slapping a steady rhythm against the glass. Thwack-hiss, thwack-hiss, thwack-hiss. Inside the car it was silent. Anderson didn't turn on the radio. He needed to think. He needed to construct a timeline. How long had this been going on? He thought back to the London trip in March. He had paid for a new transmission for Monica's car that week. He thought back to the Dubai conference in November. That was when he had cashed out a small bond to help with the tax unexpected assessment Julian had claimed. Every trip coincided with a crisis. Every crisis coincided with a check. Anderson's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles were white. He wasn't a man given to rage. He was a man of patience. But this was a violation of the fundamental code between father and son. It wasn't just the money. It was the exploitation of his worry. He had spent nights praying for Julian's safety on those long flights, staring at the ceiling, wondering if his son was eating enough, sleeping enough. All the while, Julian was likely ordering room service. The scenery changed. The suburban sprawl gave way to winding mountain roads lined with towering pines. The rain began to lighten, replaced by a misty fog that clung to the trees. He saw the sign Azuengius Resort and Spie to 2 Miles. Anderson slowed down. He felt a wave of nausea. Part of him, the father part, wanted to turn around. He wanted to go home, drink his tea, and pretend the delivery driver had never come. He wanted to believe the lie because the lie was safe. The lie meant his son was a hero, not a con artist. But the engineer part of him drove on. The engineer knew that ignoring a crack didn't make it go away, it just guaranteed a collapse. He pulled up to the gatehouse. It was manned by a security guard in a uniform that looked more expensive than Anderson's best suit. Welcome to Azure Springs, the guard said, leaning out, checking in. I'm here to meet a guest, Anderson said. His voice was steady, surprising him. Julian Sterling, I'm his father. The guard checked a tablet. Hey, yes, Mr. Sterling in Suite 404. He's currently at the clubhouse. You can park in the visitor lot to the left, thank you. Anderson parked the Volvo between a Porsche Cayenne and a Tesla Model S. His car looked like a relic from a forgotten era. He stepped out, buttoning his raincoat. He walked toward the clubhouse. It was a massive timber and stone structure overlooking a pristine golf course that was impossibly green despite the gray sky. He didn't go inside immediately. He walked around the perimeter toward the patio that overlooked the 18th hole. There were heat lamps glowing orange, keeping the damp chill at bay. He heard them before he saw them. Lauder. Loud, raucous laughter. Anderson positioned himself behind a decorative pillar, peering through the leaves of a potted palm. There was a table of 4 men. They were dressed in polo shirts and expensive slacks. The table was littered with empty beer bottles and plates of half-eaten appetizers. And there, in the center, holding court, was Julian. He looked healthy. He looked tanned. He didn't look like a man stressed by international business dealings. He looked like a man without a care in the world. So I told him. Julian was saying, loudly enough for Anderson to hear over the wind, "Dad, the yen is fluctuating like crazy. I need a buffer." The table erupted in laughter. Julian took a swig of beer. "I swear, the old man buys anything if I use enough buzzwords. Fiscal liquidity, market volatility. He eats it up. He thinks I'm the next Warren Buffett." "Doesn't he check the news?" one of the friends asked. "There's no fluctuation like that right now." "He checks what I tell him to check," Julian scoffed. "Besides, he's sitting in that big empty house with his memories. I'm doing him a favor, giving him a purpose. He feels like he's saving the family empire." Anderson felt a physical blow to his chest. It felt like a hammer striking a rib, giving him a purpose. "And Monica?" another friend asked. "She's cool with it." "Monica is at the spa," Julian grinned. "She's getting the gold leaf facial. Why do you think I had to ask for the extra $4,000? Facials aren't cheap." "Boys, more laughter." Anderson leaned back against the stone wall. He closed his eyes. Monica wasn't at home stressing about the mortgage. She was here. They were both here. They had played him. They had scripted a scene, performed it in his hallway, taken his money, and driven 40 miles to laugh about it. He wasn't a father to them. He was a resource. A bank account with a pulse. Anderson opened his eyes. The nausea was gone. The shaking in his hands had stopped. A strange, cold clarity washed over him. It was the feeling he used to get when he walked onto a site where a building was failing, and he saw exactly what needed to be done to stabilize it. You don't scream at a failing building. You don't cry over it. You shore it up. You strip it down. You reinforce the structure, and you remove the rot. Anderson didn't confront them. He didn't march over and flip the table. That was what a weak man would do. That was what an emotional man would do. Anderson took out his phone. He turned off the flash. He stepped out slightly from behind the pillar. Click. He took a photo of Julian laughing with his beer. Click. He took a photo of the table covered in expensive food. Then he turned around and walked back to his car. He sat in the driver's seat of the Volvo. He didn't start the engine immediately. He pulled out the checkbook from his glove compartment. He always carried a spare. He opened it to the register. He looked at the last entry, Monica Sterling, $4,000. He took his pen and drew a single, neat line through it. Next to it, he wrote a void lesson learned. He started the car. Phase 1 of his life as a doting, gullible father was over. Phase 2 was about to begin. And Anderson was a very, very good planner. Anderson sat in his study, a room lined with bookshelves that smelled of cedar and old paper. It was 3:00 a.m. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the world outside silent and dark, but inside Anderson's mind, a chaotic storm was raging. On the heavy oak desk, usually reserved for drafting blueprints or reviewing structural reports, lay the autopsy of his relationship with his son. It wasn't a body he was examining. It was a decade of bank statements, credit card bills, and canceled checks. After returning from Azure Springs, Anderson hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He had gone straight to the basement, dug out the banker's boxes labeled TXA and a FAML sa PPORT, and begun the grim work of forensic accounting. Anderson was methodical. He used a ruler and a red pen. He created a spreadsheet on his laptop, his typing slow but deliberate, categorizing every dollar he had given Julian and Monica over the last 5 years. Category A. Medical emergencies, June 2200, 500. Reason Monica's emergency dental surgery, complex root canals, Julian had said. Anderson cross-referenced the date with his credit card statement. He had given Julian the card number over the phone to pay the clinic. The charge wasn't from a dentist. It was from the Sapphire Gem and Jewelry Co., located in the downtown district. Anderson felt a cold sweat prickle his neck. He remembered that day. He remembered Monica crying on the phone, mumbling in pain. She had been faking a lisp. They had bought diamonds with his sympathy. Category B-Zine Career Investments. February 2023 on 12,000. Reason. Julian needed to buy in to a partnership track at the consultancy firm. Anderson traced the check. It had been deposited into a joint account, and 3 days later, a withdrawal of the exact same amount was made to Marina Del Rey Boat Sales. They hadn't bought a partnership. They had bought a jet ski or a down payment on a boat. Category C Housing Crisis. Ongoing 40,000 monthly average. Reason mortgage assistance due to delayed payroll. Anderson pulled up the public property records on his laptop. He navigated to the county clerk's website and searched for Julian's address. The page loaded slowly, spinning a small gray circle that mocked his impatience. When the deed information popped up, Anderson stopped breathing for a moment. O Dublin Julian and Monica Starnun, Mercia Chiasis paid in full dated August 2020. Anderson stared at the screen. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes, hoping he was hallucinating from fatigue. He put them back on. The words hadn't changed. Paid in full. Julian had used the inheritance from his mother's life insurance, the money Anderson had insisted he take, to be safe, to pay off the house 5 years ago. For 5 years, Anderson had been paying a mortgage that didn't exist. Every month Monica would come over, wringing her hands, talking about foreclosure notices about the bank calling. It was all theater, a monthly performance designed to extract rent from a lonely old man. Anderson pushed his chair back. The legs scraped loudly against the floor. He walked to the window and looked out at his own backyard. It was overgrown. He had stopped paying the gardener 2 years ago to save money for Julian's Tokyo trips. He looked at the reflection in the glass. He saw a fool. A man who had built bridges and skyscrapers, who could calculate the wind load on a 50-story tower, but couldn't see that his own foundation was being eaten away by termites. But as the initial wave of humiliation receded, it was replaced by something harder. Something like steel. He returned to the desk. He didn't cry. He didn't throw the papers. He organized them. He created a binder. Tab 1 sim, the fraudulent medical bills. Tab 2I, the fake business trips. Tab 3, the ghost mortgage. Tab 4, the photos from Azure Springs. He labeled the binder Piro JST Rovetron. He looked at the total sum at the bottom of his spreadsheet for $482,000, nearly $500,000. That was his retirement. That was the world cruise he never took. That was the classic car he sold. That was his security. You didn't just take my money, Julian, Anderson whispered to the empty room. You took my trust. You took my peace. He closed the laptop. The silence of the house was no longer heavy. It was expectant. It was waiting for orders. Anderson picked up his phone. He dialed a number he hadn't called in years but knew by heart. It was 40:15 a.m., but he left a voicemail. Elias, Anderson said, his voice raspy but firm. It's Anderson Sterling. I need an emergency appointment today. I'm coming to the city. Prepare the revocation papers. All of them. He hung up. He went to the kitchen and made a fresh pot of coffee. He had a lot of work to do before the sun came up. The architect was back on the job, and he was about to condemn the building. Elias Thorne's office was on the 40th floor of a glass tower in the financial district. Elias was Anderson's contemporary, 75, sharp as a tack, wearing a suit that cost more than Anderson's car. They had known each other since Vietnam. Elias sat behind his desk, his fingers steepled, looking at the binder Anderson had placed in front of him. He flipped through the pages. He looked at the spreadsheet. He looked at the photo of Julian laughing with a beer at Azure Springs. Elias closed the binder gently. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Anderson, Elias said, his voice low and dangerous. This is substantial. This constitutes elder financial abuse, fraud, grand larceny. I can have the police at the Azure Springs Resort in an hour. We can have them arrested before they finish their breakfast buffet. Anderson sat in the leather chair, his hands resting calmly on his cane. He looked different today. He was wearing his best suit, a charcoal wool 3-piece he hadn't worn since Eleanor's funeral. He was freshly shaved. His eyes were clear. No police, Anderson said. Elias frowned. Anderson, they stole $500,000 from you. They are mocking you. Look at this photo. They are laughing at you. I know, Anderson said, and if I call the police, it becomes a mess. It becomes public. Julian will claim it was a misunderstanding or that I gave it as a gift. It will drag on for years. I will look like a senile old fool who was easily duped, and even if they go to jail, I won't get the money back. It's gone, Elias. I know that, so what do you want to do? Elias asked. Let them get away with it. No! Anderson smiled. It was a thin, tight smile. I want to teach them about structural integrity. When you put too much weight on a weak support, it doesn't just crack. It collapses. I want to be the gravity. Anderson reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single, yellowed document. Do you remember this? Anderson asked. Elias took the paper. He squinted at it. The loan agreement from 2012. When you lent Julian the down payment for his first house. Read Clause 4, Anderson said. Elias adjusted his glasses. In the event that the borrower's Julian Sterling acts in a manner that is financially detrimental to the lender's Anderson Sterling, or upon any evidence of financial malfeasance, the lender reserves the right to call the full principal and interest due immediately. Furthermore, this loan is secured by a secondary lien on the property located at. Elias looked up, a gleam in his eye. The house. You have a lien on their house. I never filed the release, Anderson said. When he paid off the mortgage with Eleanor's insurance money, he forgot about this loan. It was the down payment loan separate from the bank mortgage, $80,000 plus interest, compounded over 12 years. He thinks he owns the house free and clear, Elias realized. He does. Anderson nodded. But I hold the note. And since he has proven financial malfeasance, Anderson tapped the binder. You can foreclose. Elias finished the sentence. Not just that, Anderson said. I want to restructure my entire estate. Today, okay? Elias opened his legal pad. Tell me. First, Anderson said, holding up a finger. Revoke the power of attorney immediately. If something happens to me, I don't want Julian making decisions. You are now my proxy.
Wow.
Done. Second, my will. Currently, everything goes to Julian. We'll change it to charity. Elias suggested. No, Anderson said. That's too cliché. I want to set up a living trust. The Eleanor Sterling Foundation for Structural Safety. All my assets, including my house, go into the trust. I will remain the trustee until I die. After that, the trust will be managed by a board. Julian gets nothing, not a dime, not a cufflink. And the house they are living in? Elias asked. Cal the note, Anderson said softly. But not yet. Timing is everything in engineering. You have to wait for the maximum load before you pull the pin. When? They are coming back from Tokyo in 2 days, Anderson said. I want the foreclosure notice and the demand for repayment to arrive exactly 1 hour after they walk through their door. I want them to still be unpacking their suitcases. Elias wrote furiously. He paused and looked at his friend. There's one more thing, Anderson. You have barely enough liquidity left in your accounts to survive the year if you don't get that money back. I have my house, Anderson said. And I have my pension. I'll be fine. I'm used to living simply. But I need one more favor. I need you to draft a fake document for me. A confirmation of a wire transfer, Anderson said. For $2 million. From the Nakamura Corporation to Anderson Sterling Consulting. Elias raised an eyebrow. What are you planning? Julian thinks I'm a resource, Anderson said, his eyes hard. I'm going to show him that I'm actually a gold mine. And then I'm going to let him dig until he buries himself. The trap was set. Now Anderson just had to wait for the prey to step into it. He spent the next day cleaning his house. He scrubbed the floors, dusted the blinds, and mowed the lawn. He wanted everything to look perfect. Normal. He placed the fake wire transfer document Elias had printed on the dining room table, casually underneath a stack of junk mail, but visible enough if someone were looking. At 2:00 p.m. the phone rang. Anderson looked at the caller ID. Julian Mobile. He took a deep breath. He visualized the persona he needed to play. The doting, worried, slightly confused father. He picked up the phone. Julian. He answered, injecting a tremor of anxiety into his voice. Is that you have been so worried? I thought you were in the air. Dead! Julian's voice was breathless, panicked. The acting was Oscar-worthy. Dead, listen to me. I can't talk long. I'm in trouble. Trouble? What kind of trouble? Are you in Tokyo? I'm at the airport in Narita. Julian lied. Anderson knew for a fact, thanks to the GPS tracker in the Find My Friends app he had quietly reactivated on the family shared plan, that Julian was currently at a steakhouse 5 miles from Azure Springs. There was an issue with the contract. The Nakamura group, they're playing hardball. They're claiming a breach of protocol. They're holding my passport, Dad. They won't let me leave the country until I pay a settlement fee. Anderson gripped the phone. The audacity was breathtaking. They took your passport. Julian, go to the embassy! I can't! Julian hissed. If I involve the embassy, the deal dies. The firm will fire me. I'll lose everything. Monica, the house, everything. I just need to pay the fee, get my passport, and fly home. I'll get reimbursed next week, I swear. How much, son? Anderson asked. 20,000, Julian said. Dollars, I know, Dad, I know it's insane. But I'm scared. They have security guards watching me. Anderson closed his eyes. 20,000. That was the exact price of the membership upgrade at the Azure Springs Country Club. He had seen the brochure online. Julian wasn't in jail. He wanted to upgrade to the platinum level before he came home. 20,000. Anderson muttered, I don't have that in the checking account, Julian. You know that? The stocks, Julian pleaded. The blue chip portfolio. Sell it, please, Dad. I'm begging you. I'm your son. Don't let me rot here. Anderson paused. The silence stretched. I can't sell the stocks today, Julian. The market is closed, Anderson said. But what? I received a settlement myself. Anderson lied. From the old consulting gig I did back in '99. A residual payment came through yesterday. It's substantial. He could hear Julian's breath hitch. Substantial. How much? It doesn't matter, Anderson said. What matters is getting you home. I can wire the money. But I need to go to the bank in person to authorize a transfer that large international. It will take me a few hours. Okay? Julian said, the panic instantly replaced by greedy relief. Okay, Dad, you're a lifesaver, seriously. Go to the bank. Wire it to the usual account. I'll transfer it to them from there. I'll go right now, Anderson said.
Julian. Yeah, Dad.
I love you. You know that, right? Everything I do is for you. I know, Dad. Love you too. Hurry. The line went dead. Anderson put the phone down. He did not go to the bank. He went to the kitchen and made a sandwich. He ate it slowly, enjoying every bite. Then he sat down at his computer. He opened his email. He composed a message to Elias. Message: he asked for another 20 to K. The note is called, serve the papers tomorrow at 500 p.m. Anderson leaned back in his chair. Julian wasn't getting $20,000. Julian was getting a reality check. Anderson looked at the clock. It was time for his afternoon nap. He hadn't slept this well in years. The anxiety of being a provider was gone, replaced by the calm certainty of a demolition expert watching the countdown timer tick toward zero. The Tokyo trip was about to have a very turbulent landing. The Tuesday following the Tokyo crisis was bright and unseasonably warm. Anderson sat on his front porch in a wicker chair he had recently dragged out of storage. He was drinking iced tea, watching the neighborhood breathe. The mailman waved. A neighbor walked a golden retriever. It was a picture of suburban tranquility. But inside Anderson's chest, a countdown clock was ticking. At 40:45 p.m., a black SUV turned the corner. It wasn't a taxi from the airport. It was an Uber Black, likely ordered from the drop-off point where they had parked their car to maintain the illusion of an airport arrival. Anderson watched as the vehicle pulled into his driveway. The doors opened. Julian stepped out first. He was wearing a rumpled suit, his tie loosened. His hair intentionally mussed to suggest 18 hours of grueling travel. But Anderson, with his newly sharpened vision, saw the details. The fresh tan line on Julian's wrist where his watch sat. The healthy glow of his skin that no amount of recycled cabin air could produce. Monica followed, dragging a carry-on bag. She wore oversized sunglasses and a pashmina scarf. Looking every bit the exhausted, supportive wife, they walked up the driveway. Anderson didn't stand up. He just watched them, swirling the ice in his glass. "Dad!" Julian called out, his voice thick with feigned fatigue. "We made it, God. What a nightmare." The flight was delayed 3 hours on the tarmac. "Welcome home," Anderson said calmly. They reached the porch. Julian leaned in for a hug, but Anderson remained seated, creating an awkward distance. Julian patted his shoulder instead. Did you get the wire sorted?" Julian asked, his eyes darting to Anderson's face. "I checked the account when we landed, but nothing had posted yet. I had to put the settlement fee on a credit card I didn't know I had. Maxed it out. It's going to be a disaster if we don't pay it off in 48 hours. Anderson took a sip of tea. "The wire. Yes, we need to talk about that." "Is there a problem?" Monica asked, lowering her sunglasses. "Anderson, please tell me you sent it. The bank is going to foreclose if we don't clear these debts." "Go inside," Anderson said. "I've set everything up in the living room." Julian and Monica exchanged a glance, a mix of confusion and relief. They assumed "set everything up" meant the paperwork for the transfer. They walked into the house, their heels clicking on the hardwood. Anderson stood up slowly, picking up his cane. He checked his watch. 4:58 p.m. He walked inside. Julian and Monica were standing in the living room. On the coffee table, there was no checkbook. There was no wire transfer confirmation. There was only the heavy black binder labeled Pierrot Routuon. "What is this?" Julian asked, reaching for the binder. "Don't touch that," Anderson said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had the density of concrete. It stopped Julian's hand in midair. "Dade, what's going on?" "You're acting weird," Julian said, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "We're exhausted. Can we just sign whatever needs signing so I can go sleep for a week?" "You're not tired from the flight, Julian?" Anderson said. "You're tired from the golf tournament. How did you shoot, by the way? Did the new Tightlace driver help your slice?" The room went deathly silent. The air conditioner hummed, a mechanical drone that seemed to amplify the sudden tension. Julian's face went pale. What are you talking about?" "The Tightlace driver," Anderson repeated. "Custom set. Delivered here by mistake on Friday. I believe you needed it for your 100 p.m. tea time at Azure Springs." Monica gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand.
"Dad, I'll..."
Julian stammered. "That I can explain. It was a corporate retreat. The Nakamura deal. They hosted it at Azure Springs. I wasn't in Tokyo. I was managing the clients here." "Stop," Anderson said. He didn't shout. He just held up a hand. "Just stop. I drove there, Julian. I saw you. I saw you drinking beer. I heard you telling your friends that I was a gullible old fool. That I was your resource. Julian's jaw worked, but no sound came out. The Tokyo narrative had collapsed so instantly, so completely, that he had no backup lie prepared. You didn't just lie about the trip. Anderson continued, walking closer. You lied about the mortgage. You paid off the house 5 years ago with your mother's insurance money. Anderson, please. Monica started to cry, the tears coming fast and practiced.
We were drowning! We have expenses you don't understand! We were just trying to keep our heads above water! Be drowning me!
Anderson asked softly. By taking my retirement, my security. I trusted you. I thought I was helping my family build a future. Instead, I was funding a lifestyle. Dade, look. Julian stepped forward, aggression replacing the shock. Okay. Fine, we lied. I'm sorry, we shouldn't have done it. But we're family. You have plenty of money. You're sitting on this house, on your pension.
We're just trying to survive in a tougher economy than you ever had!
You can't hold this against us forever?
I don't hold it against you,
Anderson said. The bank does. The bank. Julian frowned. What bank? What bank? The doorbell rang. Ding dong. It was exactly 5:00 p.m. That will be for you. Anderson said. Julian walked to the door, confused. He opened it. Standing there was a large man in a cheap suit holding a manila envelope. Julian Sterling, the man asked.
Yes.
You are served. The man thrust the envelope into Julian's chest and turned to leave. Julian tore open the envelope. Monica peered over his shoulder. Anderson watched from the living room archway. What is this? Julian whispered. His eyes scanned the document. No-F-O-F-W-T. Deminifar Amandati Palayan.
It's the loan, Anderson said.
The 80,000 I lent you for the down payment in 2012. You surely remember the contract. Clause 4. Financial malfeasance triggers an immediate repayment clause. You can't do this. Julian looked up. His face flushed red.
This is insane! You're my father!
You're going to foreclose on us. On your grandchildren's home. You don't have children, Julian. Anderson reminded him. And yes, I am calling the note. With interest and penalties. You owe the trust roughly $142,000, payable within 30 days. Or I take the house. You don't have the guts. Julian spat, throwing the papers on the floor. You're a weak old man. You've never stood up for yourself in your life. Anderson walked over and picked up the papers. He dusted them off. I built skyscrapers, Julian. Anderson said, his voice dropping an octave. I know exactly how much pressure a structure can take before it snaps. And I know exactly how to bring one down. He opened the front door wide. Get out of my house. Dade, get out, Anderson said, and don't come back until you have a check, or the keys. Julian stared at his father. For the first time in his life, he didn't see a safety net. He saw a wall. He grabbed Monica's arm.
Let's go. He's gone senile. We'll call a lawyer. I've already called one,
Anderson said. His name is Elias. He's waiting for your call. Julian and Monica stormed out, leaving their luggage behind. They got into the Uber that was just pulling away, shouting at the driver to stop. Anderson watched them go. He closed the door. He locked the deadbolt. He walked back to the living room. The silence was back, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was light. It was clean. It was the silence of a job well done. 30 days is a long time in the world of finance, but a very short time in the world of panic. For Julian and Monica, the month was a blur of frantic maneuvering. They tried to refinance the house, but their credit rating, which they had destroyed with secret credit cards and luxury car leases, was abysmal. They tried to sell the boat, the career investment, but the resale value on a used yacht in a recession was pennies on the dollar. They tried to call Anderson. He didn't answer. They tried to visit. The locks were changed, and a new security system camera blinked red at them. Anderson, meanwhile, was busy. He wasn't sitting at home mourning the loss of his son. He was mourning the loss of the idea of his son, which he realized he had lost years ago. The man who had occupied his life was a stranger, a parasite in a suit. Anderson spent his days at the community center. He started teaching a workshop, basic home repair for single mothers. He taught women how to fix leaky faucets, how to patch drywall, how to not get ripped off by contractors. He felt useful. He felt respected. He made friends, real friends, who liked him for his knowledge and his kindness, not his checkbook. On the 31st day, Anderson sat in Elias's office. Well, Anderson asked. Elias smiled, sliding a document across the mahogany desk. They folded. They couldn't raise the cash. They signed the deed in lieu of foreclosure this morning to avoid the public embarrassment of a sheriff's sale. So I own the house. Anderson said, You own the house. Elias confirmed. Julian and Monica are moving into an apartment in Eastside. A 2-bedroom rental. I hear Julian has actually taken a job. A real one. Doing what?
Sale is
Elias smirked. Used cars. Commission only. He's starting at the bottom. Anderson nodded. Good, it's honest work. It might build some character. What do you want to do with the property, Anderson? Elias asked. The market is hot. We could flip it for a substantial profit, recoup all the money they stole from you, and then some. Anderson thought about it. That house represented everything he had tried to give Julian: stability, comfort, a head start. Julian had treated it like a right, not a gift. Sell it, Anderson said.
But I don't want the money. Elias paused. You don't know.
Anderson said. I have my pension. I have my home. I have enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a brochure he had picked up at the community center. There's a program, Anderson said. Transitional housing for families recovering from domestic abuse. They need facilities. Large houses where multiple families can live safely while they get back on their feet. He slid the brochure to Elias. Donate the proceeds of the sale to them. Start the Eleanor Sterling Housing Initiative. Elias looked at the brochure, then at his friend. His eyes were misty. Eleanor would have loved that. She would have, Anderson agreed. She always hated waste. And wasting that house on Julian was a tragedy. Giving it to people who will appreciate the roof over their heads. That's engineering. That's fixing the structural flaw. Anderson stood up. He felt lighter than he had in 20 years. One last thing, Anderson said. Send Julian a bill. A bill. Yes, for the Tightlease golf clubs. I kept them. They're in my garage. I'm giving them to the charity auction next week. But since he ordered them, he should pay for them. Elias laughed. I'll draft the invoice. Anderson walked out of the office and into the bustling city street. The sun was shining. The noise of the traffic sounded like music. He checked his phone. No missed calls. No frantic texts asking for money. He walked to the subway station. He wasn't going home to sit in the dark. He had a date, not a romantic date, a lunch date. With the delivery driver from Vanguard Logistics, the young man who had accidentally blown the lid off the whole scheme. Anderson had tracked him down and promised to buy him the best steak in the city as a thank you. Anderson descended the stairs into the station. He was 74 years old. He had lost a son, but he had found himself. He boarded the train. As it pulled away at gathering speed, Anderson Sterling smiled. The foundation held, the renovation was complete, and the view from the top was magnificent. Wow, that was intense. Anderson didn't just win, he completely re-architected his life. But let's take a second to break down exactly why this revenge was so satisfying, and more importantly, what we can learn from it. The villain here wasn't a stranger, it was his own son. Julian suffered from what psychologists call narcissistic entitlement. He didn't see his father as a person with needs or feelings. He saw him as an object, a resource to be mined. Notice how Julian never asked about Anderson's health. He only called when there was a crisis. That is the reddest flag in any relationship. Anderson's mistake, and it's a mistake many loving parents make, was enabling disguised as helping. He thought he was building a foundation for his son, but by removing all the struggle, he actually removed Julian's ability to stand on his own. As Anderson said, you don't just crack, you collapse. The brilliance of Anderson's revenge wasn't the money. It was the boundaries. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He used the truth, the ledger, and the law, the contract. He let Julian face the natural consequences of his own actions. That isn't cruelty. That is the ultimate form of parenting. So here is the lesson for today. Love does not mean being a doormat. You can love someone and still say no, in fact. Sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do because it forces them to grow. If you are the fixer in your family, ask yourself, are you helping them build a life? Or are you just paying for their vacation from reality? I want to hear from you in the comments. At what point do you think a parent is justified in cutting off their child financially? Was Anderson too harsh, or did he wait too long? Let me know your thoughts down below. And remember, the strongest structures aren't the ones that never shake, they're the ones with the deepest foundations. Be like Anderson. Know your worth. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.